So, as the mic just said, I am Tristen Norman, and I am here to answer all of your questions about travel and AI. Just kidding. But I do think that, in a time where every single industry, especially travel, is trying to figure out what to do with AI and how to address this sort of moment of innovation, I am here to talk about what it's going to mean when it comes to visuals and how that is going to impact your industry, travel. So here's what I know. Visuals are a critical currency to decision-making about how we decide on our next adventure when it comes to travel. And authenticity, yes, it's a buzzword, but it's also crucial to establishing trust in a time of AI slop, in a time of deepfakes, in a time where we are encountering an avalanche of content in our ecosystems. And today's traveler was not yesterday's. So skepticism and economic uncertainty and lack of faith in most brands has them desiring, especially today's traveler, desiring a lot more control over their experiences. And here comes AI, and it's created this sort of tightrope where on one side, you have this sort of metaphorical nuclear bomb that's gonna go off and destroy everything in our worlds. And on the other side, you have this magical thing that's gonna sprinkle fairy dust over all of our experiences. I think the reality is that it's gonna be somewhere in the middle, but that's the line that we're dancing at the moment, and it does have the possibility to touch every aspect of the travel experience. So that's what I'm gonna talk about today. So when image generation became a really big thing back in 2021, we were really thinking about our business. As you know, our business, maybe you may or not know, may or may not know that Imagery is our business, so stills, video, illustration content across creative and editorial. And one of the things we were thinking about was how do we meet this moment? And a lot of brands were on this race to figure out what to do with AI-generated content. So as we embarked on our own journey, what we wanted to think about was how do we operate outside of just this vacuum and this ecosystem of what we desire, what we want to get out of it as a business. What we wanted to understand is what does the everyday consumer actually want to see when it comes to AI-generated content? And we tested things like as part of our consumer survey, we surveyed about 7,000 consumers about 1 to 2 times a year. And one of the things we asked them is about images and what they like about it, what they don't like about it, what they're motivated by, what they're excited by. And we also asked them specifically about AI-generated content. What do they want to see? What do they want to see made with it? How does that change depending on the industries that they're engaging with? And what we found out was just a little disappointing. I know this runs counter to what we might have heard earlier in the day, but right now, AI-generated imagery is not actually influential when it comes to making decisions about where we travel, how we travel, what we want our experiences to look like. Now, we know this is also a space that's changing very, very rapidly. Things are moving incredibly quickly, but this is where we are in this moment. So the question is, when it comes to AI, what is influential? So we asked specifically about 4 pieces of AI technology that have the power to either enhance the travel experience or completely overhaul. And what we asked consumers was, what do they feel comfortable with from most to least? Rank that. What do you feel like you want to see out of an AI-enhanced or AI-powered experience? And I want you to think about what you think out of all 4 of these. So personalized travel recommendations, augmented reality, predictive analysis around pricing, and AI-powered travel assistance. And we wanted to understand, are people excited by this? Are people afraid of this? Do people want this? Because we know that there's a lot of innovation happening in this space. So think about what you think the number 1 was. I can't ask questions. Apparently, y'all are not supposed to interact with me. But think about it. And then when I go to the next slide and do the reveal, you'll say, I won, to yourself. So the number 1 desired AI-powered tool was actually predictive pricing. That on the whole, people are not totally comfortable yet with AI-powered travel assistance. They're not totally comfortable yet with personalized travel recommendations. They're not totally comfortable yet at all. Actually, they're the least comfortable with augmented reality to enhance AI travel search. That's what the data tells us. And what we're sort of, how we're interpreting that at this moment is in the context of everything that's going on. There's this no muss, no fuss practicality to where consumers are at this moment. It's almost as if, and I was talking to a gentleman earlier, that they actually don't trust what businesses are doing in this moment. They don't trust them to do right by them. They don't trust them to understand them. They don't trust their motivations. They feel like they are incredibly nefarious. And it makes sense, like something that's really functional and almost really removed from the sort of personal aspect, the intimate experience of choosing where to go, it makes sense that that's something that they desire, something like predictive pricing, and that's it. So what's driving this? There is, I talked about, this sort of macro environment that's happening. What we understand is that we're kind of existing in this space and operating in a space where there's a lot of distrust, agnostic of any industry. They actually want people to, they want brands to show where this data is coming from, how they're using it. We know as makers of content and powers of the creative industry that there's a lot of sensitivity for using data appropriately with permission and respecting copyright and respecting sort of artistic merit and not just consuming and consuming and consuming and scooping up all this content without the permission of the people that make it. We also know that, in a sort of industry, when it comes to technology and innovation, AI, even though the innovation itself is moving really fast, the adoption curve is actually moving a lot slower than it typically is in terms of the everyday consumer. And there's a lot of hesitation around how to use AI. People are saying, well, I want to see what happens. I want to know what goes into it. I want to see everybody else use it before I use it. And that's not something we typically see in terms of new innovation. Think smartphones, or think, social media platforms. And so that's what the water we're swimming in, this sort of hesitation and distrust. There's also this reality specific to the travel industry that they want to be cared for. People want to be seen and experienced, seen and witnessed for what they want out of a travel experience. This is something that's incredibly intimate, and it's incredibly expensive, too, when you think about it. It is a privilege. And so they want to feel like brands that they can go to a brand that they can trust to understand them, trust to take their safety and their privacy seriously. They want to also be able to be seen no matter who they are, wherever they come from, whatever their background is, whatever their level of income. The other thing we know is that in terms of the water in which we swim, this innovation is happening at a time where I'm sure this is not surprising to any one of you, but we're just mucking about in a lot of chaos at the moment. And especially when it comes to legacy media, social media, these platforms are losing an incredible amount of trust. There's been some research done by Pew that actually found that 3 in 4 Americans do not believe that social media platforms should have the power or the influence that they have. And our research tells us that most consumers, most people who interact and engage with these platforms feel like they are not trustworthy whatsoever. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's things like the sort of issues with content moderation. There's things like the lack of transparency and accountability from a lot of these CEOs. There's things like hate speech and harmful rhetoric that are proliferating, and it's making people want to opt out. There's also a lot of distrust when it comes to influencer content, and this is where this really, really matters, that influencers are gonna go the way of the dodo bird, and we just need to accept that. People do not want to be influenced. Often when they're seeing them encounter content that's sort of projected to be with a little hashtag at the below, sponsored, but it's projected to be real content, real people interacting with certain hotels or certain travel experiences, they know that it's not genuine because these people are being paid for that. And that feels sort of out of touch and out of reach for them. And they don't want to see that. So what's happening is that there's this fragmentation of the social experience that people are sort of migrating to other communities, disengaging completely, becoming passive consumers or users of these platforms. And why that matters is that travel has benefited the most from Instagram and the sort of halo effect of influence. It's been a place and a source of inspiration of how we've made travel decisions for the last 10 to 15 years. And it's been a place where you could sort of establish yourself visually, make a name for yourself as a brand, even if you as a brand are not producing content yourself. So you could have influencers mobilizing to tell your stories, and you benefit if a certain location goes viral. You benefit if a certain sort of type of travel or travel experience goes viral. That stuff is going to stop. And what do we do in a moment where that is going to go away? Well, you need to assert yourself. You need to actually establish who you are as a brand and how you're going to meet this moment in a way that is authentic, in a way that connects and resonates in a really powerful way. So this is where we are. Innovation is happening. It's desired by the industry, and those audiences are hesitant to embrace that. And the platforms on which the industry have relied on historically are fragmenting and eroding. And today's traveler wants different things out of their travel experience. So when it comes to how do we meet today's traveler, I think that there is a lot of realities that we have to accept while we think about this innovation that's happening. So today's traveler, they're done with aspiration. They're ready to escape routine, and they want to feel autonomous. They want to be able to have control of their experiences. So when it comes to the question that we want to answer is, what is influential, which is the question I mentioned earlier. What is influential when it comes to the travel image? Well, it is an image that actually they can trust the provenance of, that it feels like it's an image that they could make themselves. They're really excited by that. They want to feel like it's something that's in their reach. And even we looked at travelers, not just by travelers in general, but also by income level. And I think this means a lot that high income earners also want travel imagery, just like the one you see here. So that is another conversation, but that will also transform luxury travel, which I think is a space that we really need to think differently about. So, I love a cheeky little pun. Are we there yet? The question, something that we study on a regular basis is what is popular amongst the brands that we work with when it comes to travel. And what we all often see is this particular image. This is classic, this is luxury, this is wealth, this is the beach. Most imagery when it comes to travel is this is what most brands tend to choose. And this does not at all feel connected to where people are. So I think I'd leave you with, in the last couple of minutes, thinking through, we're in this moment of innovation, that visuals are a powerful currency. What we know is that people do not want AI-generated imagery in this space right now. That's the reality. But we also know that they matter, that those choices that you all make matter when it comes to visuals. So I think it's not necessarily, what I'm not going to sit here and leave you with is that, don't use AI-generated imagery ever. I think this is still evolving. This is going to be something that's changing. We've seen how people's appetites have grown in the last 3 to 4 years. But what we do know is that as you embrace innovation, you can also ground yourself in the reality of now. And the reality is that people want you as a brand to be really, really intentional about how you use AI. People want you to reflect what people desire in this moment when it comes to what they want to get out of their travel experiences. And they also want you to get creative and make a name for yourself and establish yourself and connect and build community with the audiences that you are trying to reach. So I would say that visuals are incredibly powerful, and there's a lot of stories that can be told, and I hope that in this very brief time that we were together, that you were inspired to think really critically about how you use visual content, what you're going to do in this moment of AI and innovation and all of this uncertainty. And just to remember that visual is incredibly powerful in shaping the future of what things can be when it comes to this industry. Thank you.